This is video number 5 for Access Module 2 in the Shelly Cashman book on Microsoft Office 365. We're on page 2-37 at the bottom, exporting data from Access to other applications. There are no actual instructions on that page, so flip over to page 2-38. And at the bottom, we've got some instructions on exporting data to Excel. So it says, if necessary, click the Appointments and Treatments query in the navigation pane. So that's already selected. We've got several things that look like they have the same name. Make sure you get the one under Queries, not under Forms or Reports. Now let's go to the top of page 2-39. So click on the External Data tab up here. We're going to export to Excel. We've got some import options on the left side over here, and what we've got on the right side is some export options. We're going to export to Excel, so click on the Excel icon here. It'll give you a default option for a file name. If that's not where you want to put the file, click on Browse and browse to the appropriate location. The default file format is XLSX. If you click on the down arrow, you've got some other options. If for some reason you need an older file format, there are some options here, but the odds are this is the one that you're going to want. So when you've selected the file name and the file format, go ahead and click on OK. This dialog box will pop up. If you want to save the export step so you can go back and repeat this export at some time in the future, you can do that. These instructions here are a little bit different from the textbook. We're now at the top of page 2-40. It does not ask us for a name for this. Let's click on Save Export Steps, click on Save Export, and that takes us through page 2-40. Now let's flip over to page 2-42. We're going to restrict the records in a join. So we want to open the navigation pane if necessary. It's already open, right up here. Right-click the Appointments and Treatments query. And on the shortcut menu, choose Design View. It'll take us back into Design View. Close the navigation pane. We were making some changes in the query by right-clicking on the join line here. So let's right-click on this again, click on Join Properties. And the last time that I saved it, I had option number 2 turned on. I should have had option number 3 turned on. So let's turn on option number 3. This will include all of the records from the treatment cost, which is 14 records, and all of the ones from the appointments that meet the criteria down here. Okay. Well, there is no criteria down here, so it's just going to give us all of the appointments and all of the treatments. We had 14 treatments. One of those treatments was used twice in an appointment, so we got 15 records back when we did that. Let's go ahead, click on OK, and let's just run it just to make sure. And that's what we're getting. Okay. Let's go back to Design View. We want to add a criteria here to the treatment cost. We want only things where the treatment cost is greater than 10. So type a greater than symbol and the number 10. Then let's go ahead and run it. Click on the exclamation mark up here. Now, last time we got 15 records. This time we're getting 13. So that tells us that there were 2 items in here in the treatment table that cost $10, and we are excluding them this time because we added that criteria to the cost column. Okay, it says close the query. When it says, do you want to save the changes? Say no. Now let's go to the bottom of page 2-43. We're going to use a query to create a calculation. So let's go create a query. Let's go to our Create tab up here. Click on Query Design. On the right over here, we want veterinary vendors. So double click on that and it'll appear over here. Let's stretch it out a little bit so we can see all the field names. We want to add some fields here. The vendor name, the state, the veterinary supply, just double click on each one of these, the quantity, and the cost. Now let's flip over the top of page 2-44. We've got an extra column over here. We've got a bunch of extra columns. Take the first extra one and right click on the field box up here and choose Zoom. What we're going to do is we're going to tell Access how to compute a value. We have 2 numbers available on each row here. We've got the quantity ordered and we've got the cost per unit. And what we want to do is we want to calculate what the total cost is. To calculate the total cost, you have to multiply those 2 numbers together. So we're going to put a formula in here, and it's going to be quantity times asterisk cost. Okay? But we have to give that a name. And the way you give it a name is you decide what you want to call it, and you type that We call it total cost, and then you put a colon before the actual formula. Now, if you look at what he typed in the book, he put square brackets around quantity and he put square brackets around cost. Those are not required. Access will always put square brackets around field names like that. The cases when you need a square bracket would be when you have a space in the middle of a field name. Quantity does not have a space in it. Cost does not have a space in it. So the square brackets are optional here, but Access is going to go ahead and put those in anyway. So when you've got this typed in like this, you can put square brackets in if you want, but you don't have to. Go ahead and click on OK. And down here, we'll see what we've got. And if we make this a little bit wider, we can see that the name of this field is going to be total cost. And after the colon, it's going to take the quantity and multiply it by the cost. And it did put square brackets in for us. It will always do that, even if there are no spaces in the field name. Let's go ahead and run this. Click on the exclamation mark up here at the top. Now let's take a look. If we look at the total cost column over here, it's multiplying these two numbers together and giving us the answer. We could have stored the total cost in the database in the table, but a general guideline is if you can compute an answer from the existing data, there's no need to store it there. You can just recompute it every time you pull up the data. So that's what we're doing with this query. Let's go back to design view. And let's flip over to page 2-46. That was the first instruction. If necessary, click Design on the ribbon to display the Query Tools Design tab. That's already selected. Click the Quantity field in the Design grid and then click the Property sheet. So let's click the Quantity field down here. Up to the top here, click on the Property sheet button and it'll give us the properties of this field. We're going to add a descriptive caption for the Quantity field. So go to the caption field down here. We're going to type in vendor quantity. Go ahead and hit enter when you're done. The caption is the text that will appear at the top of a column when you run a report or run a query. So now let's go ahead and run this. Before, what this said was just plain old quantity. But now that we've told it the caption we want to use, it's going to use vendor quantity instead. We're going to save this query as M02Q10. So go ahead and we can click on close here. If it says query 1 or query 2 or something like that, we can go ahead and click on close. And whenever it's got that name, it'll always ask us if we want to save it. So we're going to say yes. It's going to be module 02 query 10. Go ahead, click on OK. And we've saved the query. Now let's flip over to page 2-48. We want to create a new query with a field list from the veterinary vendors table. So again, let's go to create, go to query design, double click on veterinary vendors. We can probably close this property sheet now. Let's stretch this out so we can see all the field names. Let's click the totals button up here, then double click on cost to add it to our query. So all we're really going to do here is we're just going to get the cost out of this. We don't have any fields selected yet. If you look down here, there's nothing. We want to click on the totals button up here. Click on the totals button, you'll notice another field got added down here. Another row got added. Now we're going to add the cost field. Double click on cost. And down here, now the words group by appear. That's not what we want though. Click on the down arrow. Click on average. So there's a bunch of computations that can be done on this query. Click on average and run the query. Now that may not be what you're expecting. What it does is it pulls out every cost value from every single row in the table. It adds them up and it computes the average. So you're going to get one number when you do that. Let's try another one here. Let's go back to design view. Go down here and let's choose sum. It will add up all of the cost fields. 49.75. That's kind of a meaningless number because it is just giving costs of individual items. It's not reflecting any purchase or anything that was made. So basically what we're doing here is we're just demonstrating how you can use some of these built-in functions. Let's go here and choose min, and it will give us the lowest cost item in that table, which is $3. Let's go back to design view. Let's go down here and choose max. Let's go ahead and run that one. It'll give us the largest value in the cost field in that table. Let's go back to design view. Let's choose count. It'll tell us how many rows there are in the table. Click on Run, and we've got 5 rows in the veterinary vendors table. If I double click on the veterinary vendors table right here, I'll see I've got 5 rows. Let's go ahead and close that. Now, technically, it's not really counting the rows, but as long as we have a number in the cost field of every row, we'll get the same as the number of rows. Let's go back to Design View. Now we're going to add the vendor name. Double click on vendor name. We should match what's at the top of page 2-50. We want to change what's in the total row for vendors. Click on the down arrow here and choose where. Our criteria should be SAN star. Let's run the query. And I've still got count there. He's still got average. Let's go back here and let's change this to average. On the down arrow, choose average. Let's run it again. We get $8.75. That's the same thing that he got. Now I'm going to go back to our veterinary vendors table here and double click on it. We were looking for vendor name that started with SAN and the asterisk meant it could be followed by anything else. So this is the only one that's going to be selected. And the average cost over here is going to be $8.75. The average of one number is always going to be just the value of that number. So we can close the veterinary vendors table now. We can go back to Design View. Now we're at the bottom of page 2-51. We're going to use grouping. So it says return to Design View and clear the design grid. So let's just get our fat black arrow pointing down here, select those 2 columns, hit the delete key on the keyboard, and they're gone. Now we want to add the vendor name field. We want to add the cost field. We want the average to be our calculation on the cost field. Now let's flip over the top of page 2-52, and we're going to run the query. So it's going to give me the average cost field for each one of these vendors. Let's double click on veterinary vendors here, and we can see we've got 483, 26, and 875. Here we've got 483, 26, and 875. Now, this really isn't a very good example. What the group by will do is, if we had 2 rows in there from Duncan Veterinary Supplies, and the cost of one was $4 and the cost of the other one was $6, then it would take those 2 numbers, add them together, divide by 2, and get 5. And we would see 1 row here for Duncan Veterinary Supplies, and the value over here would be 5. If we had 100 items out there for Duncan Veterinary Supplies, you would add all 100 of them up, divide by 100, and we would still get 1 row for Duncan Veterinary Supply. So it's going to group all of the supply names together, so there'll be 1 row for each vendor name in our result. Okay, let's go ahead and return to Design View, and we're going to close the query, and apparently we're not going to save this one. So we can close the table, we can close the query, and we're going to stop there, and we'll finish up with crosstab queries in our next video.